All right. Well, good afternoon. My name is Kiki Dickinson. I'm the Building Healthier Communities Manager and Navigator, and I'm really excited to meet today and have us all get to know Kaylie Schmidt and about the Bridge program. She's the manager and a disability advocate, and I'm going to just take it over for her. So you can go ahead and introduce yourself and share your screen.
Yeah, of course. I'll start by sharing my screen because once I try to do that, I can't talk
Exactly.
to it at the same time. So here we go. There we are. Okay. Can you see that okay, Kiki?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yes. So I am Kaylie Schmidt, and I am, just as Kiki said, I am the program manager, co-founder, and then a disability advocate. And so I'm really excited to be here today to kind of chat with you about just what advocacy is. I think it's a big buzzword, and so sometimes it can get a little confusing as to what that even means, common roadblocks that we experience and some solutions to those. And then the brand new Minnesota Bridge program, which is what my baby is, that program. So you can hear a little bit about those resources and yeah, and what we're doing over there. So, like I said, Kaylie Schmidt, my connection to disability started when I got out of nursing school. I am a registered nurse by trade. I got my bachelor's in nursing. And I jumped right into pediatric nursing in the NICU straight out of nursing school. And I loved it there. I loved my little potatoes that I took care of, all these little teeny tiny lovies, and learned a lot about the system side and hospital, very large organizations, how that works. And one of the things that I was discouraged by was how little time I got to spend with my patients. And so the part that I always loved with my babies and their families was getting to teach parents about their baby, to walk them through the process, to hold their hand and say, okay, I know this looks really scary, but let's go over what all of these cords are so the next time you walk in here, it doesn't feel so scary. And just due to how the limitations of a hospital and staffing and ratios, I was finding that I had less and less time at the bedside with those families and more demands um, on me with the clinical side of things. And so I was also growing my family at home. I had my second child while I was a nurse, and he was born with complex medical needs. And so that was my first deep dive into the lived side of what families experience within the disability community. At first, I didn't really know what was going on with him, and I was shocked by how difficult navigating that process was with a nursing degree. And so when I watched, okay, there must be resources out there. I've heard about this for my patients. I'll just call the county or I will call the school district, and there must be something, a solution to this problem. And man, the amount of hours I spent on the phone with insurance or talking to doctors that didn't agree with each other or fighting for a service that my child should have, or just hoping that somebody would listen to the fact that things were not going well. And so I decided to walk away from bedside nursing at that point and fully focus on my own home. And that launched a wild journey of navigating these systems, getting diagnoses after diagnoses. All of my kids have some diagnoses or another. And so it was a several year process of really looking at what can we do to get back on track for my kid's best life. That was the thing that I think was the most shocking to me, was that I love being out in the community. I love having connections. I love getting to know people. And the more I walked this process, the smaller and smaller my world got. And therefore, the smaller my children's world got. And so I think COVID, um, with how complicated and traumatic that experience was for everybody, I do think it gave us a little bit more level of a playing field to be able to say to people, you now have firsthand experience in understanding what it feels like to be isolated. And that is what families with disabilities are experiencing on a daily basis due to limit to their access or limits to resources or limits to understanding of the what's available or behaviors or medical complexities, whatever it is. We could list a million things there. Um, and so I think it was an equalizer in helping us all to understand, hey, it is a human need and a basic human right to have connection. We're not meant to do this life alone. We're not meant to live alone. And so, if there are people within our community that are not able to access what they need and that therefore they cannot access their community, then to me, that is a human rights issue. And so, that is where my passion started to just grow of it started with nobody is going to deny access to my babies because I am a bit of a mama bear. But it grew from there to say, like, okay, all of these families, all of these individuals that experience this need to be able to have that access. And what if their voice is not being heard? How do we get that addressed? And so I started volunteering everywhere I could to really understand lived experience. I got my own diagnosis during this time. So I am a late diagnosed autistic adult, started to really understand what that meant for me and my brain, and the kind of positives to the side of my brain of being able to look at a problem from a different perspective than a neurotypical brain does. I can understand the lived experience, I can understand the professional side, and I'd really love to marry those two so that there's not such a big gap between that. And so, out of all of this, I started advocating for free for families because I couldn't bring myself to charge them when they're already paying out of pocket for so much. But was able to get connected with a grant, and Bridge was born. And so, Bridge stands for Building Resources, Improving Dignity, and Guiding Empowerment. And we are a disability advocacy mentorship program that also has a professional side. So I'll get into the whole nitty-gritty of Bridge a little bit later, but that's kind of the deep dive into who Kaylie is and how I ended up here. Now, on top of doing this with Bridge, I'm deeply involved in the disability community. Once I was able to get my kids' support set up, I just felt like I needed to use this voice that I have been given to be real loud about the fact that we're here and there's not going to be. I think it's awesome that uses this. I've heard a speaker say this over and over again, nothing about us without us. And oh, I just was like, that is my motto for the till the end of time now, because if there is not someone that is making decisions about disability services that has a disability themselves at the table, then that is a problem. And we need to make sure we fix that. So I serve on the
I
governor's
love that. I love that. Nothing about us without
without
us.
us. Yeah. And I think,
Yeah, and I think just even with your beginning intro, and
yeah,
we got to talk. Kaylee and I met at a conference last week, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have so many similarities between
yeah,
what you're doing. You're doing it more on an individual basis, which is cool, and so important. But definitely a lot of the things you're talking about, building healthier communities, is also, like we want to give the resources to families and have the families also support each other because of course we know families know a lot, but yeah, I think that's really cool, and I really appreciate you talking about COVID giving us
yeah.
the experience of knowing what true isolation was like and how we are all navigating that without the resources we need. I think that's a really good way to explain to people that don't have an
Yeah.
individual in their life with a disability or don't have a disability is they didn't experience that isolation, and it can happen on different levels, right? But we need those human connections. So I'm really excited for you to tell us about your organization and looking at how building healthier communities can partner with you. I know that a lot of people in building healthier communities, our members are in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
but I'm not familiar with exact organization like this in Wisconsin. We do
Yeah.
have a speaker scheduled for the fall that I think does it on a different level,
Okay.
more from the government side. but I'm super excited. And I think that families, we do have members in Minnesota and we'll continue to have members as we grow and things
Yeah.
like that. So thank you for
Yeah,
this.
of course. I'm super excited to be here and I appreciate yeah, you inviting me because it is an important conversation and yeah, even though we are Minnesota specific in the sense that our mentors are trained in Minnesota's disability HCBS services, which is home and community-based services. Those are things like waivers. There's a new program called CFSS. All that means is Medicaid programs in Minnesota and what they look like. And so, while that is our focus, we absolutely do disability advocacy as a whole. So, I definitely don't want anyone who listens or watches this later to feel discouraged from reaching out if they are Wisconsin based and feel like they have a Wisconsin based question. If you are not getting that answered, we are advocates through and through for disability. And so, while I can't guarantee you that I have like the exact answer on the phone the minute that you call, you're welcome to reach out to us and I'd love to get you connected because one of the greatest parts of this job is just getting to have the connection to those resources that it's hard to find when you're living this life day to day. You don't have hours and hours to pour through, all the links and Google finds. I
Right.
can do some of that and get you connected to some of those things. So people are definitely welcome to reach out either way.
Okay. Thank you, Kaylee.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so then next I was gonna do introductions, but since we're recording, we will kind of skip past that part. I have already shared kind of what my experience is. My focus has always been really combining that professional and lived experience to better translate for families, but I wanted to show you who that is. So this is me, obviously, and then these are my kiddos. Lily is 17, Logan is 12, Wesley is 6.5, and do not forget the half. That is very important. And
Yes.
then this is Hadley, our autism service dog. She is incredible. We've had her for a few years. And then this is us just being goofy in the car. So I like to show our pictures and just
Yeah.
really show that there are faces to the names and a story behind the person because I think a lot of times in the disability realm, we get really used to meeting a lot of people that have a lot of opinions on how we should, would, could use services. And one of the things I'm very passionate about is making sure that people feel like they are the experts on their best life. And that means they get to define what success looks like. And our job on the professional side is always to get creative on how we can use current programming to reach those goals. So, in light of that, we can talk a little bit about what is advocacy. How do we
Yeah.
define what an advocate is? Who can be an advocate? And then what does advocacy look like in real life? And so, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go ahead that fast. Let me go back. So advocacy in general is just a term that talks about someone speaking on behalf of someone towards their benefit, right? So if I bring an advocate to a doctor's appointment, they can do a wide range of things. They might do something as simple as just sit in the room and be another body to give some support. They might take notes so that later you have something to reference. Or we can talk about more hands-on advocacy where maybe they're helping ask the questions, they're talking to the doctor, they are helping you understand what the doctor means by the question that they're asking. And so this definition of advocacy makes it really hard because that means that there is a wide spectrum out there of what advocacy looks like, and there's not a way to really define that down to one right or wrong answer. An advocate is what you would like your advocate to be, and a good advocate is always looking to marry experiences between the two people they are advocating between. So, I think we all have had maybe some negative examples of what advocacy can look like, where maybe an advocate comes in guns ablazing and angry and is like, you are doing everything wrong, and I represent my client or I represent the professional side, and I'm here to advocate for only this side. And one of the things I love about our program is that we really are trying to shift that concept to say that a true advocate should be acting as a bridge, hence our name, between the two sides and looking to find some common ground for both people. ultimately assuming best intention always, meaning the doctor that I'm talking with wants this child to be okay. This mother that is raising this baby wants her child to be okay. You guys both just have different perspectives on how that child gets to okay. And so helping everybody to kind of let down their guard a little bit and say, hey, we just want to get back on the same page for our best life. Who can be an advocate is also a kind of complicated gray answer. This varies. A trained advocate doesn't necessarily mean anything in the US of A. There are trainings out there that you can take and have letters behind your name. They typically are things you've paid for and they're not highly regulated. And I share this because you want to be careful who you're giving your money to. There are a lot of people out there who will advertise services, paid services typically, as an advocate. And whether they have credentials or not does not necessarily mean that they know what they're doing. So you always want to be vetting your process, understanding, like looking into the program that you're looking for advocacy for, and making sure that that person lines up with what your goals are for what you're looking to have done. The beautiful thing about this, though, is that we are not quite so bound by some of the things that people encounter as barriers in this process all of the time. So, one of the number one frustrations I hear from my clients is the professionals, I know the answer, and they won't tell me what they're thinking. So I'll give you an example. I asked my, county worker which program would be best for my child, and they said, I can't decide for you. I can tell you this program offers this and this program offers this. And that's because they are bound by uh, legal rules under their job that they cannot recommend a program because that would be kicking back to a program, right? If a county worker says the waiver is best for you, well, then technically we could say that they are peddling waivers to clients,
Okay.
right? So it's sort of
Okay.
a, cover their bases statement to say, we're not going to even touch that with a 10-foot pole. I can't make any recommendations for your family. And that leaves families really confused because these programs are complicated. The language that is used by DHS or which is Department of Human Services, or disability programming in general, depending on your state. There's a lot of lingo, there's a lot of acronyms, and families are already burnt out and tired and overwhelmed, and they finally found some help, and now they need to pick a program and they don't know what those programs are. So it can be incredibly confusing. And so our goal is always to make sure that people feel like they have someone in the room that can translate for them and say, hey, when they say HCBS in Minnesota, that means home and community-based services. That's the big overarching name for the waiver program. And then they're like, oh, I've heard of waivers before. That's why I wanted to talk about this. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you for letting me know. But if we don't actually kind of break that down for them, then the family is left to just sort of muddle their way through with, 10, 15, 20 pieces of paper in front of them that are all written in that lingo. And that can be a barrier in and of itself right there. So when you're choosing an advocate, you always want to be looking for one. My big things is, does this person have knowledge in what I want them to have knowledge in? Two, can I speak to somebody who has been advocated for by this person? Because I'd like to make sure that we're on the same page. And then three, what is their approach to advocacy? Are they looking to just solve problems? Those big dogs, they're important sometimes. Like a big dog advocate, if there's a big problem, we need someone to go in and be no nonsense and say, like, hey, this is just, there is a yes and there is a no in this conversation. However, most families are looking for an advocate when they're starting the process and want to maintain the relationship with the workers that they need to work with. And so making sure that you're on the same page for what your goal of advocacy is as well. And then what does advocacy look like? Because I told you that definition in the beginning is so wide range, right? There's such a big spectrum. Advocacy really needs to look like what you want it to look like. And so it's important to me in my programming. I teach all of my mentors that the first step for them in an intake is defining what is your best life? What is your goal right now? Not just what is your problem that led you to an advocate, but what services do you think you need? And if you can't even define what those services are yet, what would your best life look like if you had no money to worry about, if you had
Mhm.
no limitations to what school you were at or what, programs were available, what would you do to and have success in your life, as the individual if they are self-determining or as the caregiver if they are, making the decisions. And I think that is true dignity, right? Is to look at the whole picture instead of just the problem. And so if we look at that whole picture as a person who has a life, who deserves dignity, who deserves choice, who deserves their best, then we get to redefine what success looks like. And so instead of looking at it as solve a problem. I didn't get the service I want, and I want that service. Well, that's important, and we do need to include that in our list of goals. If we focus on how do we get back on track to be on track for your best life and in a success mindset for you, then the sky's the limit because that means we can start to peel back those layers to understand where the issue really is instead of just focusing on the one thing that went wrong. So that means that advocacy can look like all sorts of things. Advocates can go to meetings. Advocates can just be in the background. Advocates can send you an email one time that says, "Hey, here's some resources. Let me know if you have any questions." Advocates can be someone in your own life. You can be a self-advocate. I advocate for myself all the time as an autistic adult. Hey, this is what I need. This is how I'm going to be able to access that thing. And then if I am no longer able to advocate for myself because of circumstances that are going on, I might bring in someone else to advocate for me. And so it doesn't have to be a professional always, but it is helpful to have connections to different types of advocates that can address different types of needs. So before I go on to what bridge is, do you have any questions about that? I know that's such a big concept, so I don't want to
No,
just
it's great.
breeze
I think
past it.
you could spend a whole
I think
hour
I,
talking about advocacy,
yes,
right? And
yes,
how important it is. I was thinking back, like I have a daughter that's graduating from college next week,
yeah,
but when she was 10, she had severe physical problems. She was hospitalized for like 3 months straight, and she
yeah,
had been healthy up until then.
wow.
And again, I was in the healthcare field, but
Hmm.
I realized how little I knew. And
Yeah,
then I wasn't even aware, like halfway through the hospitalization, like, oh, this isn't normal for people to be in the hospital for months and months at a time. Even kids with cancer go home sometimes or things.
yeah,
And so I started thinking, like, what do I need? Oh, why am I paying for the parking every week when maybe somebody could be helping me? Or could we sometimes stay at the Ronald McDonald House so we could,
yeah,
because we'd always take turns sleeping at the hospital. So I definitely started realizing that I needed advocacy, but I didn't know where to ask, right? And
yeah,
so, and I was thinking about how beautiful advocacy can be. That's a hard
yeah.
word for me all of a
It
sudden.
is.
But
The more you say it, yeah.
like we had a doctor or at the GI place we went, they had an assistant and she would help us coordinate, like,
Mm,
okay, she needed to get an MRI and have a scope, and she would schedule all that. And she was like a huge advocate for us. And
yeah.
it was like I would cry on the phone to her. I would just like
Mhm.
she was really my only advocate the
Yeah,
whole time, Rachel was sick for about a year. It was
yeah,
like she was the only one that was kind of looking out for
mm,
me. And luckily she could control a lot of things that we needed.
yeah,
But I realized like an organization like yours and building
yeah.
healthier communities, like having people to talk to is so great and so necessary.
So
So yeah.
important. Yeah, I think our brains go into survival mode, and we
Yes.
convince ourselves like it's it's not that bad. Like it's not that
Right.
bad, because and I
Right.
think that's important because gosh,
Right.
if you had told me on day one with my son, in 6 years, you're going to go through hospitalizations, you're going to get three kids diagnosed with autism, you're going to get a service dog, you're going to, all of the
Yeah.
things that I would have been like, check me out. There's no way I can do all of those things. I'm exhausted. I can't even, shower right now, much less
Right.
think down the road 6 years. And so a good advocate, like their goal is always, let's stabilize you first and remind you, one, you're
Yes.
going to survive this acute period, right? So for you, that was the hospital. Like we're going to get through today, and then we'll start talking about next week, like that we're not going to get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
But
In my other job, I do birth to three, and so I
yeah,
go to people's homes, and when I'm talking to them, I'm also like, you don't really realize because this is your first child, so you don't realize how much time you're spending,
yes,
with if you have a feeding tube and the
yeah,
kid has a feeding tube and you're cleaning all this stuff, and that there might be people out there could help you with some cleaning
yeah,
of your house, and they're like, no, no, I got it, and it's
yeah.
like, and then they're thinking about having another child and
Mm,
they think, oh, I could never do that. But it's like there's
right.
there's resources out there, whether it's
Yeah.
Wisconsin or Minnesota.
Yep.
But the families don't really even know what to ask for what they
Yeah.
could benefit from.
That perspective part is so important, I think, because a
Yeah.
big part of my job is helping them to say, like, gently, that, like, that this isn't actually typical parental responsibility. And because you don't
Yes.
have a reference for that, you're just rocking it because that's your only option. You don't have another option. And so, helping them to kind of see like, hey, the needs are bigger than you think, because a lot of times we're entering spaces where we're like, please believe that my child can do something. So you're always talking from a growth mindset of like, they can do that skill. They are making progress. We are doing great. And then you need to talk about services and they need to hear what you're doing. And you're like, they can do this, they can do that. And they actually need to hear what the child can't do or what the individual can't do.
Right.
And so that is such a hard shift in our brain if no one is there to say, hey, actually, this is the time to talk about how hard it is. It's okay to let your guard
Right.
down and tell them here what your worst day looks like. What does your worst day look like? Because that's the day you need help for, not the day that everything goes well and no one's ill and you have backup and all the diapers are in stock at the store. It's the day that you run out of diapers, they have the stomach flu, you don't have backup, you don't feel well, and they just developed a new behavior you've never seen before. Like that's
Mhm.
what we want to hear about because that's where we really need we need assistance for. And then I think there's another side of that too, of feeling like I don't want to take it away from somebody else. I can't tell you how many
Right.
times I hear that of like, well, if I sign up, then someone with so and so, whatever diagnoses that feels harder or more intense, than what you are experiencing. I don't want to take it away from them. And so I always try to explain to my families, like, you are not removing a service from someone else. If your child is eligible, you are eligible for that service. And so that doesn't take it away. It just means that you get it. And if they're eligible, they will also get it. So please feel free to reach out, and ask and it's okay to ask for that help. That's so hard, especially as Midwesterners. We're really bad at this.
It's true. That's true. And I wanted to welcome
Yeah,
Colleen. So she joined at one of the
yes.
parents. So
Hi,
welcome.
Colleen.
This is Kaylie Schmidt from Bridge Program Manager Disability Advocate, and she just was talking about advocacy in general, and now we're going to go more into what Bridge is and what she does as an advocate and everything like that. So
Yes.
great.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself at all or just listen?
I don't. My name's Colleen Peterson.
Okay.
Um, I have a son that is 12 years old who was
Okay.
born with a rare syndrome called Wolf-Fishburne syndrome, and he has Lennox-Gastaut as well, and is receives physical therapy services at St. Croix Therapy.
Wonderful.
Um, and I also am a medical device rep. I implant the vagus nerve stimulation, and 95+% of our patients are severely disabled.
Wow.
That helps with these seizures,
Yep.
not just the severe seizure. I mean, any seizure really is severe and can be increases SUDEP anyways.
Yeah.
Sudden unexpected epilepsy death, but I do that as a full-time job. And then I also have a nonprofit called the Cole Foundation where we help families in and around the Minnesota area, Wisconsin, of course, because
Yeah.
we live in Woodbury, right next to Wisconsin, and we help families get adaptive equipment.
Cool.
And we
Yeah.
provide it to them for free for like 6 months at a time. So, like the
Awesome.
wheelchairs, the standers, the gait trainers, the adaptive bikes, the things that take a year or so to get and are fighting insurance as well as private insurance for them to finally get, we help them get that faster.
Oh, that's incredible. We're definitely going to have to chat,
Thanks.
Colleen. I'm going to have to find you. So
I know,
I'll,
Thank you.
Kaylie. I was like, that's why I was like, whole foundation, definitely add that to your list. I'm gonna
yes,
be
I literally am going to write it down.
reaching out to Colleen to do a webinar on the Cole
Good.
Foundation because it's helped so many families.
Yes, yeah. And I can back up a little bit. Colleen, I did like a more in-depth introduction, but I would love to give you a little bit of perspective of who I am so that you're not just questioning that as we move forward here. But so I was a registered nurse in the NICU. And so that's where I started my career in Minneapolis. I'm also in Minnesota. And I left bedside because all three of my children were diagnosed with autism and a bunch of other diagnoses. We've dealt with quite a few, both physical and mental health related diagnoses. And through that process, I just realized how difficult getting connected to resources is, walking through this process, navigating DHS, getting onto services, those things were. And so I started advocating for people around me. And then I was like, we need this for more people, and I can't do this all by myself. So that bridge was born out of that. And we are a Minnesota-based program, mentor-based, where we connect individuals and their caregivers with mentors to help walk them through the HCBS services, IEP kind of stuff, anything disability related, and then any barriers to that. So most people that come to us have hit some sort of snafu in the process, but our goal is always to get in early and earlier where they have a trained advocate that is there to help them learn how to use their voice well and how to advocate for the things that they or their family member needs. And so we have a professional side as well, and we do professional trainings too. So I'm just about to dive in more nitty gritty of what Bridge is. We are also a nonprofit and we are also free of charge to all of our families. So I'd love to connect with you and see how we can share the Cole Foundation and then how we can help some of your clients too, if that's something you'd be interested in. So, okay, I will move forward here though. Let's see. So Bridge stands for, I said this a little earlier, but it stands for Building Resources, Improving Dignity, and Guiding Empowerment. Our mission statement is over here on the left. It says the Bridge program connects individuals with disabilities and their caregivers to personalized resources through meaningful mentorship and advocacy. Our mission is to empower individuals to define and pursue their ideal life, providing guidance, encouragement, and tools to navigate systems, build confidence, and advocate for their unique goals and values. And so ultimately, we were born out of everyone deserves to have a voice in the room that represents them. It is so hard as a parent to walk into, in Minnesota, we have the Min Choices Assessment, which is your entrance into disability services. Are you eligible for, waivers, Medicaid, those types of things? That's usually kind of our first big step. That tends to be a 2 to 3, maybe even 4 hour long meeting where you're talking about every aspect of disability. And that is where the first time where they are asked to talk from a negative perspective of what can't your loved one do or what can't you do. And that's just not natural. And so it is an unfortunate process that a lot of people fall through the cracks in because they are not sure what the question is really asking, or they don't have perspective to understand what that thing is supposed to look like. Kiki, we were talking about this a little earlier in the call, but I can't tell you how many Min Choices assessments I've sat in with a family. And there'll be one of the questions is, does your child move around the home independently in the way they would like to? And so many parents are like, yes, of course. And I'm like, they're non-ambulatory. You have to pick them up and you have to move everything around and then
Yeah.
they can roll to get to what they want
Yeah.
to get. But that's
No.
because you've set up that entire space to make it look exactly how you want. And what if you had a ramp? What if you had a stair lift? What if you had a Hoyer? What if you had an accessible shower? What if you had but they don't even have perspective for that. They're just being so creative with the resources they have, which is amazing. But you shouldn't have to jerry-rig a tube to the back of your car because your child overheats in the car and then might have a seizure. We should be able to get a cooling vest that they can wear in the car that will help them maintain their temperature. But if we don't even know those things exist, how do we know what to ask for, right? And so our goal is always to give them someone that they can speak to. We don't necessarily always go to meetings. It's certainly an option depending on the mentor and mentee relationship. We allow them to kind of decide together what they would like that to look like. But they will always have someone that can prep them before the meeting, that can send them resources, that can script with them, that can practice, that can answer questions, that can be available by phone if something goes wrong in the meeting or something unexpected comes up. And when something doesn't go the way we expected, which unfortunately happens all of the time. Um, then there is someone that actually has an educated answer of, hey, this is what the state legislature has said about that thing. And that means your child has access to X, Y, or Z. So that's a huge part of our job as well. And so the other beautiful thing about this is that we will never charge families for this service. The hard part about Medicaid and waiver services in Minnesota is that you unlock a wonderful list of services once you are eligible for those programs. But until you are eligible and signed on, which is on average, 9 to 12 month process on the light end in Minnesota,
Uh,
depending on the county. Um, Once you're on it, then you can get the funds. But until you're on it, if you need help navigating that process and it's a paid service, that is coming out of pocket. And so we are really adamant about making sure that our advocacy is free of charge to families forever. And so we will always be committed to that. Um, and so, yeah, so that is what Bridge is on the mentorship side. And then there is a second half of Bridge that isn't quite as well advertised because it's a little bit more niche, but we also do professional trainings. And so we are getting in with counties in Minnesota, we have 87 counties. And so all Medicaid waiver programs are run by the counties, which means there's 87 different interpretations of how the same state program is run. So
wow.
depending on whether you live in Wright County versus Hennepin County versus Beltrami County, you might get a different answer on whether you can have that service or that thing that you are supposed to get on the waiver. And so another reason that it's so helpful to have those mentors. But we go in and train the county on what the actual lived experience is of the families who are trying to access these programs is. We talk with doctors, professionals. We've been in Mayo Clinic, Center Care. We are meeting with other nonprofits to get better networking out there so people understand where these small nonprofits that can help solve problems, just like Colleen just popped on and talked about the problem that she's solving. That is something I deal with literally on a weekly basis for families of, yep, I know we're just holding on. If you can't afford that thing, then we got to just wait until you get that insurance coverage, or we just got to wait until you get that waiver. And so that is a huge need that these nonprofits can fill, but because nonprofits tend to be small and we do not have great marketing budgets because we have a lot of other things to spend our money on, we really rely a lot on word of mouth and getting it out there that, hey, we're here. And so it is helpful to also be able to network with them as well. And so we do those trainings to help people just understand what do the services really look like. So we're hoping to reduce where doctors will give a diagnosis. I'll give an example. I got my son's autism diagnosis was given by Mayo Clinic, which I would argue is one of the better organizations because they have that process down to a T. They handed me a big, huge packet that said, understanding your child's autism diagnosis with like 400 brochures in it. It's a big exaggeration, but there were a lot of pieces of paper in there. And at the very top was like, call your county and get on a waiver. And I was like, okay, call my county and get on a waiver. Like, that's so easy. And I call my county and they're like, well, there's a 12-week wait for your min choices. I'm like, well, it says here you have 21 days. And she laughed and was like, yeah, but that's never been a thing. And I was like, okay, so why has nobody updated the rule? And she's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, okay. And I was like, what do I need to know for this assessment? She's like, oh, we'll just go over all of it when I get there. Okay. That's not how my personality works, but as a parent, what am I supposed to do? Either A, I think a lot of parents just trust it of like, okay, we'll figure it out when you get here, or B, we just panic about it until it's time because what are we going to do? And so having someone that you can call and say, hey, what does this process look like? What do I need prepared for? Can really help families go into that educated on, hey, I know what my rights are, I know what my responsibilities are, and I also know what my options are. And so making sure that they really get what that looks like is so helpful because then the doctor can say, hey, one, this process is going to be like long. Let me give you a better, like realistic expectation of what this is going to look like, but I do think it's worth it. And two, we have this list of advocacy resources, and it would be great if you want to connect with one of them so that at least they have it. Some of the parents can take it and run, and they are just born advocates. They're already doing it, and it's great. Every parent is an advocate. However, we all have differences in our capacity based on, life that's going on, our own diagnoses, you just wrapping your head around a diagnosis, whatever it is that maybe advocacy is not their strong suit yet. And so having someone that they can call when things go wrong is absolutely what I want, but I really want them to know that having someone in their corner that will speak up for their voice regardless of how the process goes is so important as well. So,
I think there was one thing you said to me last week at the conference we were at together. You
yeah.
said something like, we need people to stop, we need families to be telling
Mhm.
powers that be what they need instead of powers that be telling the families what they need.
Yeah, I literally was just writing. I have a speaking gig at the end of the month that is for a big national conference, and our whole concept is about equity in self-direction. And so choosing, your own services and actually making sure that that's accessible for everyone. And one of the main focuses in that is just talking about the fact that yes, it has become, unfortunately, something where I don't think it's intentional by most professionals. I think honestly, they're like, okay, get these services and everything will be great. But then the families feel like talked down to. They feel like they don't, that this professional doesn't truly understand what my lived experience is, to just say, just get services and everything will be fine when your child is having, you know, 25 seizures a day and you're just trying to survive with no staffing and no reprieve, no respite. Like, okay, and now you want me to sign up for a 9 to 12 month process, or, you yourself have a disability and now on top of chronic pain and changing capacity and trying to figure out what you're going to do to support yourself, you also need to figure out a county process and how to get those services and advocate for them. That's a big ask. And so I think that, if we started to shift the conversation to say patients and, in the situation of doctors, patients and their loved ones are the experts, and we can stand to learn to understand how they are living their life right now. And our goal is always to help make that life better, and that we don't get to define what better looks like for you, because
Yeah.
truly, self-direction services, when the what they were created to be is that you get to choose how you use this service to best meet your needs. It's meant to be flexible because if we think about autism's my wheelhouse, so I'll use autism. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Like it is such a different experience for every person that experiences it. And I like to think of it like the DJ booth, where you got all the booth, like the buttons and knobs and the slides and I don't know, there's a million things on it, right? And if you think about that, like one is sensory needs and one is communication needs and one is physical comorbidities, like things that you also experience that happen in the body and you happen to be autistic. If you put on like social concerns on there, each person experiences that a little bit different. So for me, when you talk to me, I don't think, well, maybe I'm being a little too kind to myself, but I don't think social is the first thing that people look at and say, wow, she might be on the spectrum, right? Because I can communicate with you in a way that is mostly socially appropriate. However, I do have significant sensory needs, and learning to have those social conversations took a lot of work behind the scenes. And my capacity changes from day to day based on how I'm feeling, what else is going on in my life, all of those sorts of things. And so, if we look at services, it was supposed to be flexible to mean that not every child or individual with autism needs a communication device. Not every child or person with autism needs sensory friendly clothing. Not every child or person with autism needs, adaptive equipment in order to feed or dress themselves. However, some of them need all of that. And so if it's self-directed, that means you get to decide what would be helpful for you. Unfortunately, we lose this a little bit where people start to be like, oh, just these are the things that are good for autistic individuals. Well, that's not looking at the person as a whole, and that's missing the whole mark of what self-direction is supposed to be.
And
So,
and
yeah.
I'm thinking that the mem also as an advocate, you can help families figuring out what they need, right? Because
Mhm.
like as a therapist for 30 years, it's like when the iPads came out, like everyone wanted an iPad. And it's
Yeah.
like, but let's really make sure, does your child need an iPad? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's really, like going both ways. We want to
Yeah.
be asking for what we need or helping them
Yes.
ask what they need.
And encouraging creativity within those
Yeah.
choices too. So
Well,
go
and
ahead.
I'll just, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
one of the stories that will always stay with me.
Mhm.
It was soon after is it the 0 to 3 program? So is it
Yeah.
when he turns exactly 4? When you get into that, you get kicked out
That's
of everything
zero.
that you know? Or is it he's 3 years and 1 day old? Something
Yeah,
like that.
3 days and
When
one
he's
day.
finally
Yeah,
kicked out of
that's
it.
what it is.
And then
Yep.
because my son's on a CAC CDCS waiver.
Yep. Yep.
So we're on the higher end of
Yeah.
it all.
Yep.
And but anyway, but that wasn't the way at the beginning. And
Yeah.
he was already in a wheelchair at this point
Sure.
when he was little.
Yep.
And G-tube fed, he does not talk, he can't even point, that kind of
Sure.
stuff. And anyways, my point of bringing that up is I had Washington County to do the min choice assessment, and they hated my support planner, which I didn't know that. Like they
Sure.
literally saw her as the devil, which was not helpful for me. But it
Right.
was long
But
story
not your
short,
fault.
I had
Yeah.
asked, yes, but nor did I know that, nor it was completely unprofessional. I mean, I literally had 8 people from the county. It was very intimidating. I
Oh my
left
gosh. Yeah.
into my garage to start bawling because it was
I
so
bet.
awful. And
Yeah.
Kiki, who knows me, knows like I'm not really a crier.
Sure.
It was awful.
Yeah.
And I remember when I had said, they were saying, like, what kind of things do you need with this waiver? Like, why do you need it? And I said,
Yeah.
well, I would like to have, a couple things. And of course, my support planner helped me come up with some of these ideas.
Yeah.
Was it's become unsafe for him to go down the stairs. Like,
Sure.
we need a stair climber.
Yep.
And I am not lying by any bit of this. They literally looked at me and scolded me and said, your kid does not need to access the basement of your home.
Mhm.
And I said, what about going outside in the backyard? And they literally told me, you have a front yard. He can go in the front yard because we have a big, beautiful home.
No.
And literally made me feel, I felt, it just sickened me because I
Yeah.
felt like I over asked. And like, I thought, wow, I guess that, that was so wrong of me, and
Yeah.
felt so ashamed. And then
Yeah.
little later on turn realized like what I was asking for was
Yeah.
completely and utterly appropriate. But they were
Absolutely.
basically saying like, well, is his bedroom going to be downstairs? Because he doesn't need to access that basement. And it's like
Right.
telling a paraplegic that they can't, they're only allowed to access one portion of the whole
Right.
house that they have. Like it's
You
just
Right.
don't need the
insane.
rest. Yeah, you
Yeah,
pay
you don't
for
need
it,
the
but why
rest.
would you need the rest? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not an uncommon story. I'm so sorry that that is what you experienced. And clearly, you have used that pain to, put into purpose because look at the incredible advocate you are today.
Yeah.
And
Well,
to
thank
be
you. But
fair,
yes.
you
Yeah.
were that advocate then. You just didn't have the knowledge base to back it up to say, like, oh,
Right.
heck no, like, this is what I should have. Right. And so,
Right. Right.
yeah, I totally get it. And I could give you a million examples of very similar things where, and again, I think the system is unfortunately broken as a whole. We're seeing that everywhere. It's not, there's lots of very well-meaning people within those systems. However, they're tied by a system that just it wasn't built for disability, even though it was, but it wasn't. They didn't actually consult disabled
People with
individuals.
disability, yes.
No,
They did
right,
this stuff.
right,
So,
right.
unfortunately, that's not an uncommon story. But I think that is why we're so passionate about advocates, is because, how different could your experience have been if someone had called and said, hey, I don't want to discourage you. You get to pick who you want for a support planner, but I have heard from a few people that they had a negative experience with the county. It's not your fault, but do you want some more options, or would you like to talk to someone who had used that support planner? Those are natural things that I do on a daily basis that I just encourage people to vet their people, because you're so desperate. You're like, sure, okay, one person told me this person is good. I'll take it because I'm tired. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just saying, I'm just going to go ahead and pick the support planner. But those decisions are big and can make it or break your experience. And so having someone in your corner that can say, hey, hey, now let's just slow our roll. Yes, your child gets to access wherever the heck you would like them to access. And that is what this program is for. And they actually cannot deny you based on that basis. But I also like to get really creative with my clients of like, okay, you've been given this budget for a year. And I see this all the time where they get on these services and they're like, okay, I'm going to go to this special, I hate this term, but special needs website, because that's still what they're called. And they have all this equipment that is specifically for my child's needs. And I'll be like, okay, can you talk to your OT and just see which of those things that you love, and then see if there's anything on Amazon that could address the same need for a absolute fraction of the cost and allow you to get 10 things this year instead of two, you know? And that is where I think it's fun to watch families go, oh, okay, I can get creative. Like, I do have flexibility within this program. I do have options. I do have ways I can start to use my brain in the way I use it every day. Because, Colleen, you live this life. Like, we rig things in our house. Before I knew I could have a home modification, the safety things I did in my home to make sure my kids didn't elope or take off in the middle of the night, I- probably against fire code, to be entirely honest. But I found a solution because somebody had to sleep at some point, and if it wasn't going to be the children, I had to find a way to close my eyes for 3 minutes so that I could get up and do their cares again the next day. And so, those things families don't want to talk about because they're like, I'm embarrassed that this is what we're doing. But the reality of it is, you're going to thrive when I can give you these dollars and tell you you can use that creativity to actually get what you need now, right? And so watching them really shift and turn a situation around is my favorite part of this job, to be honest. So,
And Colleen, you probably didn't at that time know you could ask for a different support worker.
yeah,
Like when I talk to families, I'm always like, I always say I do that with doctors too. Like I advocate for them. Like if you don't feel good about this doctor, then look for another doctor. If you don't feel heard, like we don't stay with the same hairdresser if we don't
right,
like how they cut our hair.
right.
Right,
So we don't have to feel
right.
bad if we switch, you know,
Yeah,
I
or
will, yeah. Although like, these counties, though,
yeah,
I Washington County has not been good to me. I
sure,
don't trust them for
sure.
as far as I could throw my own son.
You're
Like
not alone.
I trust them zero. But
Yep.
on the same point, they pushed me to not have a support planner and forced me to think that I could be my own support planner because
Mm,
they hated the person that I had. Not only
sure.
she also used me as a guinea pig to tuck away $20,000 towards
You're not the only
Crescent Cove
one.
to
Oh,
do like a week stage, like, oh, you have this extra money, let's do, like, I can't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks, and like let's do like you say she did like 2000 a night. Well, I didn't, she was my support planner, I trusted,
yeah.
and here it was fraud because Crescent Cove's free, it's a nonprofit that's free, so she was trying to use my unused, unallocated. Yeah, so it was, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, I just went through the min choice process.
Yeah.
Like May 1st is when our budget year
Sure.
starts.
Yeah.
So literally, I just did.
Yeah.
And of course, they take the last day to approve stuff. And
Yeah.
just even personally, I might want to reach out to you guys.
Yeah.
I'm a little miffed that with the new unbundling, they were
Yes.
pretty kind last year, but
Yep.
now like all the medical supplies, they're like, we need dollar amounts for every single thing. And I'm like, there's like 100 things on there that we on a regular,
Yeah.
throughout the year use. And now they want me to price everything out
Yeah.
because they did it's completely pended or
Yeah.
unimpended or whatever.
Right.
I can't
Yeah.
use it. And so I don't
Set.
have time to do this. And then they're
Yeah.
basically forcing me to use a support planner. And I don't want to because I don't really need one.
Yeah. So there is a bill that is out right now. The numbers escape me at the moment, Colleen, but I can, when we connect, I can give it to you. They didn't reach it in the last committee meeting, but it is first on the docket for the next committee meeting, and it would repeal waiver reimagine, and force them to redo that process that started the unbundling that caused CFSS, all of that. So keep your eye on that because there is a very large advocacy group that is focused on specifically families that are typically on CAC waivers, which means for those of you watching that don't know what waivers are in Minnesota, the CAC waiver would be a highly medical waiver. So that is like an almost ICU level, like hospital level of care is required typically every day 24/7. And so that is addressed with a CAC or CAC waiver. Um, and so one of the things that is has been kind of scary in Minnesota is we've had this waiver reimagine looming, and with them requiring things like what Colleen just um sorry, I am so sorry about that. With like what Colleen was just talking about with unbundling services, there is this concern that the families that have highly medical kids that are using their waivers to be creative to get staffing when there's a huge nursing shortage are going to be forced to institutionalize their children again because they cannot provide the level of care that they need without that budget. So there's some exciting, or I'll say it this way, promising information out there that is leading us to believe that we have some options. But Colleen, I would love if you reached out to me about your issues that you're having currently with that. I will share at the end of this my
Put your email in the chat.
yeah,
So,
perfect. Okay. And then my contact information is on the slides as well. But
okay.
yeah, definitely reach out. And then also, if there are people that we train mentors. So these are volunteer mentors, which are typically parents or individuals who are on these services that want to help somebody else. And so that kind of goes into what this advocacy model is here. This is what our model is at Bridge, which is first connection, which is one we talked about in the very beginning. Kiki, Colleen,
Yes.
you missed this part, but we talked about how one of the hardest parts of the disability journey, and anyone in the entire world, every person, the only minority that you can find yourself a part of at any point in your life tomorrow is disability. You could tomorrow have an accident or an illness or a life-changing event that plops you right into the disability community. And part of that experience has typically been for individuals and their families is a just their world gets smaller and smaller. We used to go places we can't anymore, or we have never gone places, and now I can't even go to the grocery store. And so when I started this process with my kids, my goal that I wrote down our first year was I would like to be able to stop paying grocery delivery prices because I was paying an arm and a leg to have groceries delivered because I couldn't even go to the store by myself. I couldn't leave my kids to go to the store. I couldn't bring my children to a store. So that was my big goal. And then the second one was that I was hoping that we could just stay in the house and no one would run away for one day. Like maybe we could just not run away. Um, what do you mean the park or an amusement park or, my dreams were so, so small. And it's not to mean that those aren't great dreams. For some people, that is the full dream is maybe I want to just go to the park. Great. That's a great dream. But I'm saying as we get smaller and smaller, we lose out on a basic human right, which is connection and doing life together. Humans are not meant to be isolated. We see that, mental health statistics show us that the more that we are alone, the higher those rates of just worse outcomes are. And so, if a family is going through the hardest thing they've ever gone through, let's not leave them alone in their house to just sort of hopefully maybe figure it out all by themselves. And so, the first step to this process is always connection, which is saying, hey, I'm here. I know what you're going through. You are not alone, and we are going to figure this out. During that connection period is also where we're remembering what is a goal. Because right now we're in survival mode so much, I don't even know how to think past tomorrow. And then we sort of move into that empowerment, which is where, with supports, someone gets to practice using their voice again. I know you've heard no a million times. I know you feel like your voice doesn't matter. I know you feel like you didn't have the education to even say what you wanted. Maybe you didn't even know what you wanted. And so now we're moving into empowerment where we get, oops, sorry, where we get to practice using our voice. And if something goes wrong, the advocate is right there to say, you know what? It's okay. I'm right here. Remember, that's not quite what we talked about. Let's do this instead. And then as they move out of that empowerment, really along that line from empowerment to reaching out, they're dropping off from using their advocate. They're calling less and less. They're maybe just calling with updates. Or my favorite one is when they start calling me and telling me all the things that are going great. Then I'm like, woo, we are doing it. Like I went to my IEP meeting and they didn't even try to tell me no this time. And I'm like, yes, that's amazing. Um, and then the last part is reaching out and so really it's a reaching back to say, okay, who else in my community can I pull forward with me? We're all going to move forward together. And so the great thing about this model is it's actually not my own. Like I created this material. Obviously, I gave it these names. However, I think this is something that the disability community just does naturally. And it's one of the beautiful parts of this minority that I love so much is that these individuals are so creative, are so willing to think outside the box, are so willing to help their neighbor. And so you will find this naturally if you watch everywhere. In the therapy office, two moms are sitting and waiting, and the mom says to the OT in passing at the end, yeah, I'll work on that. I just don't know how I'm going to fund that sensory outfit or sensory clothing or the swing that we need. And another mom is like, well, have you heard about this program? Because you can get in and here, blah, blah, blah. And here's my worker, and here's the number, and here's the link, and give me your phone number. I'm going to text it over to you. And they do this all the time. And it's so beautiful because that is what life is really supposed to look like. When we talk about villages and go back to like primitive human experience, the things we did well was pooling together resources for all of our better survival, right? And that is what the disability community does in such a beautiful way. Hey, my kid outgrew their vest. Why don't you use it until you can get yours? Colleen's program. Hey, we're going to find equipment and we're going to loan it to you until you can fund your own. Incredible, right? And so that is what we have created here. And the best part is that at the end, I would say probably 90%, if not more, of my clients are like, okay, and now who do I help? And where else do we see that in this day and age where people say, hey, I just went through the worst thing I've ever experienced. How can I help someone else go through it and go through it a little bit better than I did? So I love that. And this is why I love advocacy, is because I think it's in all of us. And so it's so fun to get to experience walking alongside families and seeing them go from a place where really feels hopeless at a lot of times, not to make it, so dark, but it is hard. This is a hard life because this life was not built for our family members and our loved ones or our individual selves that have the, struggle that we are experiencing. And it can feel a lot of times like you are banging your head against a wall to say, hey, exist and I matter and I want to be involved in my world. And so giving them their power back is the best feeling in the entire world, and I will never get tired of it. So yeah, that's our model and why we do what we do. And so I always like to
And
leave with,
I'm just going to stop you real quick for
yeah,
just one quick second, Kaylin. I know we're
yeah,
wrapping up in a little bit,
yeah,
but we don't need to be in a super rush. But I was just going to say that um, I knew about your organization when we met, but I didn't understand everything. And
yeah,
now I see why building healthier community and Bridge have some similar things because
Yeah,
we aren't calling ourselves an advocate, but that's what we're doing is we're trying to connect families. We're
yeah,
trying to empower parents and children and adults with disabilities,
yep,
and then also having them make connections and serving as resources for each other. So
yeah,
Colleen, I was really glad that Colleen made it. I emailed her last night and was like, I need some Minnesota families on here.
yeah,
And no notice whatsoever, but I'm excited for Colleen to look into joining Building Healthier Communities because we're a brand new pilot. We've just finished our pilot stage and we're
yeah,
really trying to reach out to families of the St. Croix Valley. And Kaylie had said, like, well, is this something that's going to expand to other areas? And I'm like, yes, we'd love to,
yeah,
and we're welcoming anyone at this point. And it sounds like
yeah,
Kaylie, you're in Minnesota
yeah.
and you're based in St. Cloud, but you reach out to anyone in Minnesota,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep. We serve all 87 counties. And then we do, like I said in the beginning, if we get calls from other states, we will help however we can. So connecting to resources, finding you an advocate in your state, whatever it is. If it's something that we can help, because some of this does translate because some of these programs are federal,
Sure.
we're happy to do that. But yeah, our focus is all of Minnesota.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
These are your resources here.
Yes, yeah. So just threw some resources on here. I really like that COVID gave us some virtual support group options. Because a lot of us just don't, I'm not going to use my staffing hours in a week to go to a support group. I'm going to use them to go to the grocery store or like the doctor's office, right? And so having a virtual support option is great. Parent to Parent USA is a national organization that has chapters. I did check, there is an active Wisconsin chapter. There is an active Minnesota chapter called Family Voices of Minnesota as well. Your ECFE groups are great too. Your birth to three teams can be great in getting connected to resources or another family. Local Facebook groups are also great. They, I think all of us probably have a love-hate relationship with Facebook sometimes, but I
For
do think
sure.
there is a great way to like network for. I know a group here in Minnesota where I will ask like, who do you use for a support planner that you love? And like, I'll get a bunch of, responses, and that's helpful. Always vet your stuff that you get anywhere. And these are not, just to put a caveat here, none of these are official partnerships. These are resources that I just have either used myself or found online or have encountered in my day-to-day work. So always make sure that you're vetting to make sure that this is actually what you're looking for. For advocacy groups, PACER is school specific, so IEPs, Disability Rights Wisconsin, and then there is the ADRC, which is oh my goodness, I'm going to forget it right now, but it is a disability living resource. I think
Yes.
the ADRC
Yeah.
stands for, but that is that group. And then Minnesota specific on this side, Disability Hub is great. It is a one-stop shop for all the services. You can talk to a live chat that has trained individuals that can talk through what all the programs that DHS, which is Departments of Human Services, offers. Bridge is here. That I, of course, have to plug me in here. That's us. And then Pacer for Minnesota is here too. And so, yeah, so these are just a few jumping off points for some resources. But one of the things, parts of my job, the many hats that I wear, is I am our resource gal. So if there is something specific you are looking for, I could do a PowerPoint that's probably 4.5 hours long with just resources broken down into all the different categories
Wow.
that we need. But I won't do that to you because then you'll be really bored. But if there is something particular that anyone that you work with or that watches this webinar needs, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to connect with you or get you connected to someone else that might know. So.
This is
Yeah.
really exciting. I appreciate you adding some Wisconsin
Yes.
advocacy groups.
Yeah.
Another one is the Wisconsin, it's like people with disabilities, Wisconsin people with developmental disabilities. And
Yeah.
I will be posting a webinar. I just interviewed the
Cool.
gentleman, the communications director, and it's amazing. And so
Yeah.
I'll definitely get that up there and you'll be able to see it because I think
Yeah.
that I don't know if Minnesota has all those things, but it was
Yeah.
really, really impressive. So
Yeah. I would
yeah.
also say like getting involved with your state and well, state and uh like country government is also helpful. Minnesota has a governor's council on developmental disabilities, and I just joined it as a parent, but they have a lot of resources out of that. And so every state government has committees and boards that are specific to needs and um, experiences of the community. And so obviously, I don't have a list right now of what Wisconsin has, but it would be something worth looking into if you're encountering a problem. In Minnesota, we also have ombudsmen for every county. And so those are great resource if you're encountering problems and feel like you need an answer that's above and beyond the big wig that you escalated things to. Our ombudsmen are great. And so, yeah, so there's lots of ways to get creative. There are federal resources too. So if you feel like your rights um, have been violated or dismissed. There are ways that you can go about filing formal complaints for school districts, for the state Department of Ed. There's also the Office of Civil Rights, which is focused specifically on access. So if you have been denied access, and that can be like physical access, like we think access, we think wheelchairs, or like, there was no accessible entrance or whatever. But access means your ability to participate in something. And so if you feel like you have been denied access on the basis of a disability, that is a civil rights issue. And so the Office of Civil Rights can help you file a formal complaint if you feel like you are not getting the answer that you need there. So anyway, all that to say, there are a huge spectrum of ways to say, hey, something went wrong and I need help. And that can be small, like teeny tiny nonprofits that help you get connected to a resource, all the way up to, federal processes that say, hey, something is really broken down here. We need to look at a systems change. So yeah, but
All
that's all my
right.
resources for
Well,
today.
thanks so much. This was
Yeah.
really, really informative, and I look forward to us partnering more
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So I will be in touch. I'm going to stop the recording
Okay.
right now. Thank you,
Wonderful. Thank you so
everyone.
much.